Book 3. The Council of the Ages. Chapter 4. Part 3. Like all elven knights, the presence of orcs in the Palace of the Heavens repulsed them, but the orders were clear: to tolerate them and do the impossible so that conflicts did not arise no matter how much it cost. Any disobedience of this order would imply a very harsh sanction, being banished to the mines of the shadows in an all-out fight against the Stufos, which was almost certain death. Only those whom the Elven King wanted to see far away and dead were destined there. Erinsh's idea was to entertain himself by seeing if any of his knights defied his orders, and the truth was that the mercenaries were helping as much as possible to make the prince's idea come true. Paulana, who was fed up with the hatred that Enrich had for her, she also had to add that she could not stand those shabby mercenaries who were drinking and eating all the reserves of her kingdom. I had never seen so much eating and drinking, not even dwarfs. Among the elves it was rude to eat a lot and greedily. You always had to show moderation, especially at a dinner as elegant as this. Everything they did was a provocation for her. Her companions glanced sideways from time to time at their neighbors at the table and babbling among themselves. They threw little jabs at those bastards. That was the only consolation they had left, knowing that they could not do anything else. The truth is that to be the victors of the Iron Wars they looked more like beggars than great warriors. They should wear bright armor and have a torso full of medals. However, they wore ragged clothes full of patches. Dinner was nearing its conclusion, and the laughter of the mercenaries had subsided a little. It was time for dessert. Kritus and Gosberg got into a fight over the last glass of elven rose liqueur, which was a delight, the best of the dinner. They played for the last cup by lottery, as it could not be otherwise. The Denka won. Kritus accused Gosberg of cheating. Angrily, the dwarf threw the glass overflowing with liquor at the Denka, who dodged it with agility and ended up hitting Paulana squarely, staining her beautiful golden mane. The elf did not take the unfortunate accident very well. She was already a little fed up with the continuous noises and screams from the other table. Agnoruk stood up to apologize as he didn't want to leave Arian and a boke bad. But Paulana was outraged, as many of the mercenaries and other guests couldn't help but laugh at the sight of the rose liqueur in her hair. What the elf lacked was to be the laughingstock of the evening. Troll shit! Paulana called the half-orc. Agnoruk endured the provocation. There should be no fights, he had promised Arian. Our apologies, it was an unfortunate accident. The half-orc tried to be as kind as he could. Damn coward! Voron Lamata. Your mother should have killed you at birth. Paulana insulted him while the comment provoked laughter from his fellow elves. Agnoruk being insulted in that way was something he did not tolerate well. Even so, he sighed and turned around so as not to start a fight. Paulana also turned to her table to have the party in peace. She did not want to cheer up Prince Enrich. Everything seemed to have calmed down, but Gosberg threw with a very quick and almost imperceptible gesture a new glass of liquor at the elf. It hit her head again and then bounced towards Agnoruk, hitting him at the same time as Paulana. No one really knew where that cup came from, but it didn't matter either. The fuse was lit. They both turned and began to fight among themselves, calling each other everything. They were all already hot, and the other members of both tables joined the fight, to the amazement of the rest of the guests and the anger of Arian and the king of the elves. The music stopped. They managed to separate the others thanks mostly to Kirsch, but Agnoruk and Paulana continued to fight despite everyone's attempts to stop their duel. In the end the two contestants left the building. The fight continued in the gardens until Agnoruk himself did not hold back anymore and punched the elf, that left her half-stunned. Arian, who had risen next to Aris, came out of the hall and shouted at the half-orc to stop fighting. Agnoruk, enough please. Agnoruk turned around, and it was then that Paulana took advantage of this distraction to kick him in the lower areas of the half-orc, which caused him such great pain that it even caused hiccups. The rest of the audience took pity on Agnoruk. It had been a terrible blow. Paulana began to laugh when she saw the scene of seeing Agnoruk screaming in pain and hiccuping. The half-orc did not take it very well. Despite the tremendous pain, he was able to recover and took the elf by the neck and then threw her towards a hedge and went after her. It took 8 elven knights, Kritus, Aris and the help of Sabu to prevent Agnoruk from skinning Paulana with his own hands. As they were unable to stop fighting, they were both taken to the dungeons, while exchanging insults and remembering all the ancestors of the other's family. With the expulsion of Agnoruk and Paulana, things returned to normal. The guests returned to their assigned places, while the elf and the half-orc disappeared. Their insults gradually stopped being heard. The king of the elves was frankly annoyed by Paulana's indiscipline. Inrinch smiled satisfied. It had worked better than expected. He could sanction all the knights at the table, but especially the elf. Agnoruk would stay in the dungeon tonight to calm down, but Aris indicated that they would accept the punishment that would be meted out to Agnoruk, since it was not an attitude worthy of a mercenary of the Blue Phoenix Company either. The dinner ended with a play to celebrate the Council of the Ages. Some of the great monarchs disappeared, but many guests stayed to see the show. Dancers performed to the music and voices of an elf choir, a play that dealt with the role of elves during the wars against demons during the First Era. The light was very subtle. Arian saw the work for a while, but she was very tired, so she left after a few minutes. Only Kush and Loranthus stayed to contemplate the entire work. The music was sad. When it came out, they were narrating the defeat of the elves by the demons. Once outside, she felt relieved. That work had something sinister about it. He tried to see if he could catch up with the rest, but they were probably already in their chambers. Arian decided to walk slowly to gaze at the starry sky. Surprisingly, he came across a young girl who was sitting on a railing on the terrace. The girl seemed happy since she had a large piece of cake in her hands. Her face expressed happiness for dessert, but to Arian's surprise this face was rounded, not as elongated and stylized as that of the elves, although her pointed ears stood out. That gave Arian the intuition that the girl was half-breed. The girl smiled as she saw Arian coming towards her. She wore a beautiful golden combination made of a fabric very similar to that worn by the great king of the elves in his evening dress. The beautiful dress was complemented by simple diamond earrings and a gold headband. Arian stood right in front of the girl, who didn't seem at all frightened or uncomfortable in the presence of the priestess. "Hello. Want a piece of the blackberry pie? Today Amnabona, the royal cook, has surpassed himself." Arian was not very fond of sweets, although her daughter liked them very much since Gosberg used to offer her. Not to be impolite, he accepted the piece offered by the girl. For a second his fingers touched and Arian noticed something familiar about the stranger. The truth is that the cake was very good. It was not very cloying and the blackberry flavor was very noticeable. She tasted it with pleasure and admonished herself for not having tasted this delicacy during dinner. The girl smiled when she saw Arian's reaction. "What's your name?" "Donata." "Nice name. Mine is Arian." "Ah. You are very beautiful." Arian blushed a little at the girl's words, but now she was intrigued by Donata's presence in the palace. What was a mixed-race girl doing within the king's most personal circle? When it was known that the elves of Bordalania did not have a great sympathy for the half-breeds. "Donata, do you live here with the elves?" "Of course, I was born in this place." That was even stranger, but suddenly a maid appeared who apologized to Arian and called out to Donata, who smiled when she saw the young elf appear. Donata ran out to get lost in the gardens. The maid sighed and went after the girl. Arian watched as Donata escaped from the elf until she disappeared. Then he noticed the jewel that she had hanging around her neck. It was something very subtle, but it shone faintly. Now he was no longer sleepy. He went back into the large room to see how the play with Kush ended. Then all the guests retreated to their chambers. When Arian arrived at his room, Aris was fast asleep. She thought of Donata again. She looked familiar. That girl had something known. But the heaviness after dinner, the fatigue of the trip and the meetings took their toll on her. She quickly fell asleep hugging the half-orc. Tomorrow would be another very long day.